This is the Ministry of Truth. I'm Gordon Comstock. We're going to get into chapters 3 and 4 of Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States by Samuel Morse, the renowned inventor, American inventor from the 1800s, Samuel Morse. Suppressed, out of print, long out of print book. But he was warning us in 1835 of exactly what's happened today. And, oh gosh, I just heard the most recent installment of the Collins brothers, Paul and Philip Collins, on the From the Grassy Knoll show. And doggone, if they weren't at it again, poo-pooing the idea that there could ever be one entity atop the New World Order. Of course, they have no scientific basis for that. They have no rational basis for that. It's their own belief system. The fact is, we have pyramidal structures everywhere, and I can concede their point that maybe at a future date, the Chinese might leap out and defy this Illuminati one world government system that's coming. But so what? Yes, entities can jump out and throw revolutions. That's what Orwell wrote about time and again. That's what we see through history. But there are also periods in history, probably most of the periods in history, where one entity reigns. And I'm telling you, if you read the book, The Transformation of the Republic, by Charles Wilcox, you will see that from the 1800s on, at least, the entity that was atop this conspiracy for world government could only have been Papa Nero and his boys, and his scarlet and purple-clad boys. Now, why are the Collins brothers afraid of this? They have such acute research skills, and they're afraid to turn their research skills towards this avenue. They don't even countenance this. It doesn't fit their paradigm. Well, the fact is, folks, when somebody is terribly brilliant, like the Collins brothers, it's been my observation that they really, people like that, they're almost always right, because the few times they are wrong, they really beat themselves up over it more than the average guy. So it gets to a point where a person like that, they really are afraid to be wrong, because they deep down know that if they're, the next time they're found out to be wrong, I mean, we all eventually are going to be wrong again, we're human, they know that they have to go through that process again of beating themselves up. Hey, they were wrong again. Well, guess what? Collins brothers, you're wrong. The Vatican sits atop the Illuminati. And it's okay. You're human. You can be wrong. But you got to shake the cognitive dissonance. You have to have the Christian humility to be able to overcome your intellectual arrogance. I'm sorry. Okay, with that, enough of that. Let's get into Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, Chapter 3. Before commencing the examination of the perfect fitness of the instrument, Catholic missions, to accomplish the political designs upon this country of Austria and her despotic allies, I would premise, says Samuel Morse, that I have nothing to do in these remarks with the purely religious character of the tenets of the Roman Catholic sect. They are not even in discussion. If any wish to resolve their doubts in the religious controversy, the acute pens of the polemic writers of the day will furnish them abundant means of deciding for themselves. But every religious sect has certain principles of government growing out of its particular religious belief, and which will be found to agree or disagree with the principles of any form of civil government. Footnote to that: opposite tendencies of popery and Protestantism. On the very threshold of the examination upon which I have here entered, And while searching among the records of the two sects for the political tendencies of the principles of popery and Protestantism, I was struck with the marked difference in extent which the two fields of inquiry legitimately offered for examination. The prime dogma of the Catholics, that all of their church teaches is infallible, unchangeable, that what she has once taught as truth must now and forever be truth, lays open to our examination to a wide field. All and each of the precepts, laws, and acts of popery from the earliest ages to the present day may be legitimately quoted to show the political character of that sect. Innovation, repeal, reform, or progress can find no admittance into the papal system without destroying the fundamental liberty on which the whole system rests. The whole of our faith, says Cardinal Pallavicini, an infallible authority, rests upon one indivisible article, namely, the infallible authority of the Church. The moment, therefore, we give up any part whatever, the whole falls, for what admits not of being divided must evidently stand entire or fall entire. Protestantism, on the contrary, is founded on the Bible. The Bible is the rallying point of all Protestant religious sects. Let me put in my 2 cents here. This was written by Samuel Morse in 1835, before, of course, 50 years before the devilish revising committee that resurrected the counterfeit Alexandrian Gnostic Bibles that we find in the NIV and the NASV and the RSV, etc. And so Samuel Morse would have no idea, would not have understood that there actually would be more than one Bible, that there would be the bogus Bible and the real Bible, or he probably would have written it in here. Yes, Protestantism is founded on the Bible, but it's founded upon the real Bible, King James, and the lineage of Bibles leading up to the King James. Continuing now. They all believe that God is its author, the Protestants do. The religious faith of each is bound to this one volume. But as the Bible prescribes no form of faith or doctrine or of church government in which all, in the exercise of the natural and revealed right of private judgment, can agree, each sect adopts that form most in accordance with what it believes to be the spirit of the doctrines which the Bible teaches. Hence, there is a diversity of views, according to the diversities of human constitution, according to the varying degrees of intellectual cultivation, or the peculiar wants and condition incident to the infinite variety of circumstances in which human society exists. Upon this freedom to choose according to the dictates of reason and conscience, granted to man by his Maker, denied by Roman Catholics, and claimed by Protestants, is built the fabric of religious liberty. Difference of opinion being allowed, controversy, of course, ensues, and converts are to be made not by force of arms, but by force of truth, supported by appeals to reason and conscience. Zealous, according to the strength of his belief in the dogmas of his sect, the Protestant calls to his aid all the treasures of science. He believes that the divine author of the Bible, of truth in the Bible, is also the author of truth in nature. He knows that as truth is one, he that created all that forms the vast field of scientific research cannot contradict truth in Scripture by truth in nature. The Protestant is therefore the consistent encourager of all learning, of all investigation. Every discovery in science, he feels, brings to religious truth fresh treasures, free inquiry and discussion. All intellectual activity legitimately belong to Protestantism. It is by thus opening wide the doors of knowledge and letting in the light of natural science upon what it believes to be the revealed truth of the Bible, that Protestantism has been able gradually to bring out the principle of religious liberty, and in its train the invaluable blessing of civil liberty. At the commencement of the Reformation, however, we are not to look for a full development of the free principles of Protestantism. We must expect to find many truths, which to us who live in the noon of freedom are as clear as the sun. But they would be then obscured or entirely invisible in the popish darkness of the times. The slavish prohibitions, the deep-rooted heathen rites, are the arbitrary dogmas of popery. And the arbitrary dogmas of popery were then enforced by power, by ignorance and corruption, so that the struggle of free with despotic principles was attended. Through many generations, with constant vicissitude, no maxim or usage of popish intolerance that for a long time clung or still clings to any of the Protestant systems of Europe can be quoted against American Protestantism. Consequently, I am under no necessity of defending any despotic or intolerant practice which may be charged or proved upon foreign or ancient Protestantism, while every act or practice, past or present, of popish enactment is, papists themselves being judges, available to demonstrate the immutable character of popery. End of footnote. It is my design, therefore, briefly to consider some of the antagonist principles of the government of Austria and of the United States, and compare them with the principles of government of the Catholic and Protestant sects. By this method we shall be able to judge of their bearing on the permanency of our present civil institutions. Let us first present to view the fundamental principle of government, that principle which, according to its agreement with one or the other of the two opposite opinions that divide the world, decides entirely the character of the government in every part of the body politic. From whom is authority to govern derived? Austria and the United States will agree in answering, from God. The opposition of opinion occurs in the answers to the next question. To whom on earth is this authority delegated? Austria answers, to the emperor, who is the source of all authority. The emperor do ordain, etc. The United States answers, to the people, in whom resides the sovereign power. We the people do ordain, establish, grant, etc. In one principle is without question or examination. The ruler is master, the people are slaves. In the other is recognized the supremacy of the people, the equality of rights and powers of the citizen, submission alone to laws emanating from themselves. The ruler is a public servant, receiving wages from the people to perform services agreeable to their pleasure, amenable in all things to them, and holding office at their will. The ruler is servant, and people are master. The fact and important nature of the differences in these antagonistic doctrines, leading, as is perceived, to diametrically opposite results, are all that is needful to state in order to proceed at once to the inquiry, which position does the Catholic sect and the Protestant sects severally favor? The Pope, the supreme head of the Catholic Church, claims to be the vice-regent of God, supreme over all mortals, over all emperors, kings, princes, potentates, and people, King of kings and Lord of lords. He styles himself the divinely appointed dispenser of spiritual and temporal punishments, armed with power to depose emperors and kings, and absolve subjects from their oath of allegiance. From him lies no appeal. He is responsible to no one on earth. He is judged of no one but God. But not to go back to former ages to prove the fact of the Pope's claiming divine right, let the present Pontiff Gregory XVI testify. He claims and attempts the exercise of this plenitude of power and asserts his divine right. The document I quote is fresh from the Vatican, scarce 4 months old in 1835, a document in which the Pope interferes directly in the political affairs of Portugal against Don Pedro. How can there be unity in the body, says the Pope, when the members are not united to the head and do not obey it? And how can this union of obedience be maintained in a country where they drive from their sees the bishops, legitimately instituted by him to whom it appertains to assign pastors to all vacant churches, because the divine right grants to him alone the primacy of jurisdiction and the plenitude of power? The Catholic Catechism, now taught by Catholic priests to the Poles in all the schools of Poland, and published by special order at Wilna, 1832, is very conclusive of the character of Catholic doctrine. The following questions and answers are propounded. Question 1. How is the authority of the emperor to be considered in reference to the spirit of Christianity? Answer: as proceeding immediately from God. Question 2. How is this substantiated by the nature of things? Answer: it is by the will of God that men live in society, hence the various relations which constitute society, which, for its more complete security, is divided into parts called nations, the government of which is entrusted to a prince, king, or emperor, or, in other words, to a supreme ruler. We see, then, that as man exists in conformity to the will of God, society emanates from the same divine will, and more especially the supreme power and authority of our Lord and Master, the Tsar. Question 3. What duties does religion teach us, the humble subjects of His Majesty the Emperor of Russia, to practice towards him? Answer: worship, obedience, fidelity, the payment of taxes, service, love, and prayer, the whole being comprised in the words worship and fidelity. Question 4. Wherein does this worship consist, and how should it be manifested? Answer: by the most unqualified reverence in words, gestures, demeanor, thoughts, and actions. Question 5. What kind of obedience do we owe him? Answer: an entire, passive, and unbounded obedience in every point of view. Question 6. In what consists the fidelity we owe to the emperor? Answer: in executing his commands most rigorously, without examination, in performing the duties he requires from us, and in doing everything willingly without murmuring. Skips to question 8 now. Is the service of His Majesty the Emperor obligatory upon us? Answer: absolutely so. We should, if required, sacrifice ourselves in compliance with his will, both in a civil and military capacity, and in whatever manner he deems expedient. Question 9. What benevolent sentiments and love are due to the emperor? Answer: we should manifest our goodwill and affection, according to our station, in endeavoring to promote the prosperity of our native land, Russia, not Poland, as well as that of the Emperor, our father, and of his august family. Skips to question 13 now. Does religion forbid us to rebel and overthrow the government of the Emperor? Answer: we are interdicted from doing so at all times and under any circumstances. So here we have the Romans 13 surrendering crowd, all surrendering to evil crowd. Unlimited submission, right? Question 14. Independently of the worship we owe to the emperor, are we called upon to respect the public authorities emanating from him? Answer: yes, because they emanate from him, represent him, and act as his substitute so that the emperor is everywhere. Question, you see that? The emperor is everywhere. The government is God in this system, literally. Question 15. What motives have we to fulfill the duties above enumerated? Answer. The motives are twofold, some natural, others revealed. Question 16. What are the natural motives? Answer. Besides the motives adduced, there are the following. The emperor, being the head of the nation, the father of all his subjects who constitute one and the same country, is thereby alone worthy of reverence, gratitude, and obedience. For public welfare and individual security depend on submissiveness to his commands. Question 17. What are the supernatural revealed motives for this worship? Answer. The supernatural revealed motives are that the emperor is the vice-regent and minister of God to execute the divine commands, and consequently, disobedience to the emperor is identified with disobedience to God himself. That God will reward us in the world to come for the worship and obedience we render the emperor. Didn't Hitler say that? Didn't Ceausescu say that? And punish us severely to all eternity should we disobey and neglect to worship him. Moreover, God commands us to love and obey from the inmost recesses of the heart every authority. Yep, sure. And particularly the emperor, not from worldly considerations, but from apprehension of the final judgment. Again, the state is God in this system. The state is your Jesus Christ in this system. Question 19. What examples confirm this doctrine? Answer. The example of Jesus Christ himself, who lived and died in allegiance to the emperor of Rome. Are they kidding? Are they really kidding here? Wow, they're not kidding. Let me read that again. What examples confirm this doctrine? The example of Jesus Christ himself, who lived and died in allegiance to the emperor of Rome? Wow. What deceitful propaganda. And respectfully submitted to the judgment which condemned him to death. We have, moreover, the example of the apostles, who both loved and respected them. What? They suffered meekly in dungeons, conformably to the will of emperors, and did not revolt like malefactors and traitors. We must, therefore, in imitation of these examples, suffer and be silent. This is deceitful, slavish propaganda. These are lies. The apostles in the early church went to jail because they refused to take licit from the emperor. They refused to declare that it was the emperor who gave them the privilege to worship Jesus Christ. Wow. If the apostles were going to be conforming to the will of Rome, they would have done what all the other religions did. All the other pagan religions did at that time. They would have gave licit to Caesar, and they could have worshipped Jesus Christ all they wanted to, as long as they told Caesar, "Thank you, Caesar, for letting us worship Jesus Christ." That's what the church today in America is doing. Thank you, IRS. Thank you, state and corporation laws, for letting us worship Jesus Christ. But the early church didn't do that. The early church said, no, we worship Jesus Christ because Jesus Christ is King. Jesus Christ is Lord of Lords. Period. And it just so happens that if the government will will grant Christians the right to worship as they see fit, that it just so happens that Jesus, his dictates to his church, made them the most obedient servants to a decent government, to a righteous government. Christians are the best possible servants you could ever want to have. You found that? Fine, you can see that. A really good illustration of that is in the history of the Waldenses, where the Pope time and again came upon the Duke in the region, the royal ruler of the region of the Waldenses, who was a Catholic, but he had these Protestants within his domain, and the Pope kept telling him to go and slaughter them. And the Duke, he really dragged his feet as much as he could on that, because the Waldenses were his most humble and obedient servants. And then you saw what happened. The Pope eventually won over time and again, and the Duke had to go slaughter them, because the Duke wasn't that strong of a believer. But he recognized the fact that the Waldenses were decent, humble people who were the best of his servants, but they did not let anything brook their right to worship Jesus Christ, unlike the church today. Unlike this question 19 here. Holy smokes. Let's get back to the Samuel Morse book. This is the slavish doctrine taught to the Catholics of Poland. The people, instead of having power or rights, are, according to this catechism, mere passive slaves, born for their masters, taught by a perversion of the threatenings of religion to obey without murmuring or questioning or examination the mandates of their human deity, bid to cringe and fawn and kiss the very feet of majesty, and deem themselves happy to be whipped, to be kicked, or to die in his service of the emperor. Is it necessary to say that there is not a Protestant sect in this country that holds such abject sentiments, or whose creed inculcates such barefaced idolatry of a human being? Protestantism, on the contrary, at its birth, while yet bound with many of the shackles of popery, attacked in its earliest lispings of freedoms this very doctrine of divine right. It was Luther, and by a singular coincidence of day, too, on the 4th of July, who first, in a public disputation at Leipzig with his popish antagonist, called in question the divine right of the Pope. Let us now examine in contrast other political rights, liberty of conscience, liberty of opinion, and liberty of the press. Austria and the United States differ on these points as widely as on the fundamental question. Austria not only has the press in her own territory under censorship, but intermeddles to control the press in neighboring states on the principle of self-preservation. In Saxony, says Dwight, the press is fettered by Austria and Prussia, who allege this reason, that all the works published in Saxony, which are not on the proscribed list, are freely admitted into our dominions. For our happiness, therefore, and the stability of our thrones, it is necessary that the press should be fettered. As to liberty of opinion, political or religious, in Austria, no one dreams of the existence of such a thing. The dungeon is the summary mode of obtaining a most happy uniformity of opinion throughout all the imperial dominions. It is our glory, on the contrary, that all these rights are secured to us by our institutions, and freely enjoyed, not only without the least danger to the peace of the state, but from the very genius of our government, that they are esteemed among its most precious safeguards. What are the Catholic tenets on these points? Shall I go back some 300 or 400 years and quote the pontifical law, which says, Article 9, quote, "The Pope has the power to interpret Scripture and to teach as he pleases, and no person is allowed to teach in a different way," unquote. Or to the Fourth Council of Lateran in 1215, which decrees, quote, "that all heretics, that is, all who have an opinion of their own, shall be delivered over to the civil magistrate to be burned," unquote. Or shall I refer to the Catholic Index Expurgatorius, to the list of forbidden books, to show how the press is still fettered? No, it is unnecessary to go farther than the present day. The reigning pontiff, Gregory XVI, shall again answer the question. He has most opportunely furnished us with the present sentiments of the Catholic Church on these very points. In his encyclical letter, dated September 1832, the Pope, lamenting the disorders and infidelity of the times, says, quote, "From this polluted fountain of indifference flows that absurd and erroneous doctrine, or rather raving in favor and defense of liberty of conscience, for which most pestilential error the course is open to that entire and wild liberty of opinion which is everywhere attempting the overthrow of religious and civil institutions, and which the unblushing impudence of some has held forth as an advantage to religion. Hence that pest of all others most to be dreaded in a state, unbridled liberty of opinion, licentiousness of speech, and a lust of novelty, which, according to the experience of all ages, portend the downfall of the most powerful and flourishing empires." Unquote. Quote, "Hither tends that worst and never sufficiently to be execrated and detested liberty of the press, for the diffusion of all manner of writings, which some so loudly contend for and so actively promote." Unquote. He complains, too, of the dissemination of unlicensed books. Quote, "No means must be here omitted," says Clement XIII, our predecessor of happy memory, in the encyclical letter on the proscription of bad books. "No means must be here omitted, as the extremity of the case calls for all our exertions to exterminate the fatal pest which spreads through so many works, nor can the materials of error be otherwise destroyed than by the flames which consume the depraved elements of the evil." Unquote. Now all this is explicit enough. Here is no ambiguity. We see here, from infallible authority, that the Catholic of the present day, wherever he may be, if he is true to the principles of his sect, cannot consistently tolerate liberty of conscience or liberty of the press. Is there any sect of Protestants in this country from whose religious tenets doctrines so subversive of civil and religious liberty can even be inferred? If there be, I am ignorant of its name. The subject will be pursued in the next chapter. Chapter 4 of Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States by Samuel Morse, 1835. I exposed in my last chapter the remarkable coincidence of the tenets of popery with the principles of despotic government, in this respect so opposite to the tenets of Protestantism. Popery, from its very nature, favoring despotism, and Protestantism, from its very nature, favoring liberty. Is it not then perfectly natural that the Austrian government should be active in supporting Catholic missions in this country? Is it not clear that the cause of popery is the cause of despotism? But there is another, most striking and important difference between popery and Protestantism in their bearing upon the liberties of the country. No one of the Protestant sects owns any head out of this country, or is governed in any of its concerns by any men or set of men in a foreign land. All ecclesiastical officers are nominated and appointed or removed by the people of the United States. No foreign body has any such union with any sect of Protestants in the United States as even to advise, much less to control, any of its measures. Our Episcopalians appoint their own bishops without consulting the Church of England. Our Presbyterians are entirely independent of the Church of Scotland, and our Wesleyan Methodists have no ecclesiastical connection with the disciples of Wesley in the Old World. But how is it in these respects with the Catholics? The right of appointing to all ecclesiastical offices in this country, as everywhere else, is in the Pope. Now a mere creature of Austria, he claims power, as we have seen, by divine right. All the bishops and all the ecclesiastics, down to the most insignificant officer in the church, are, from the genius of the system, entirely under his control. And he, of course, will appoint none to office but those who will favor the views of Austria. He will require all whom he appoints to support the agents whom Austria is sending to this country for the accomplishment of her own purposes. And who are these agents? They are, for the most part, Jesuits, an ecclesiastical order proverbial throughout the world for cunning, duplicity, and total want of moral principle. An order so skilled in all the arts of deception that even in Catholic countries, in Italy itself, it became intolerable, and the people required its suppression. They are Jesuits in the pay and employ of a despotic government who are at work on the ignorance and passions of our community. There are foreigners who have been schooled in foreign seminaries in the doctrine of passive obedience. They are foreigners under the vows of perpetual celibacy and having, therefore, no deep and permanent interest in this country. They are foreigners bound by the strong ties of pecuniary interest and ambition to the service of a foreign despot. Footnote: the foreign emissaries of popery rewarded in their own country. This is a matter deserving of serious attention. Where now is Bishop Severus, who passed about 14 years in Boston? He was a foreigner, with no ties to this country, paid for his services by a foreign government. He had a duty to his foreign masters to perform. What that duty was may now easily be conjectured. Boston, as the capital of New England, was considered at the time he arrived the stronghold of Protestant, of anti-popish principles. Popery was there, and throughout New England held in the greatest abhorrence. For to popery may be traced, though remotely, yet clearly, the persecutions which drove the Pilgrim Fathers to this country. The history of those fathers for ages previous is but the history of hard-fought battles to wrest from popish usurpation those invaluable rights, civil and religious, which they fled to this wilderness securely to enjoy. Ere popery, then, could expect to gain foothold among the descendants of the persecuted Puritans, their almost innate abhorrence to popery must be overcome. What plan could be better devised to accomplish the end than to send the mild, conciliating, gentle Bishop Severus to demonstrate by his example and his teaching that popery was not that monster their fathers had taught them to believe it to be, or at least that now the tyrant had grown mild and tolerant. If this were the design, no plan could have been more successful. Who that has visited Boston does not know the epithets with which Bishop Severus's name is coupled? The good bishop, the liberal bishop, the excellent, pious, tolerant, mild bishop. Now all this might have been, and perhaps is true of the bishop. The instrument was well chosen. His duty was well accomplished, and he receives the reward of a faithful servant from his foreign masters in a translation to the wealthy archbishopric of Bordeaux. Again, where is Bishop Dubourg of New Orleans? He has resided in this heathen land his stated time, and having accomplished the duty prescribed to him, is translated to the bishopric of Montauban in France. And again, where is Bishop Kelly of Richmond, Virginia? He also sojourns with us until his duties to foreign masters are performed, and then is rewarded by promotion at home to the bishopric of Waterford and Lismore, and where soon will be that busy, pompous Jesuit who has been so often announced as passing and repassing between Rome, Vienna, and the United States, Bishop England. If report speaks truth, Bishop England is soon to be rewarded for his services in the cause of his foreign masters with a cardinal's hat. The following from the Dublin Freeman's Journal, preceded by a nauseous mass of fulsome compliment, gives substance to the report. Quote, after escorting these ladies, some of them nuns, to Charleston, Dr. England proceeds without delay as legate from the Pope to Haiti, over the ecclesiastical affairs of which republic he carries with him from the Holy See the most full and unlimited powers, from which we confidently trust ere long he will again return to Europe to receive as some reward for all his labors and services a cardinal's hat. For instead of receiving dignity from should such an appointment take place, Dr. England will confer dignity upon the sacred purple. Unquote. Now, in view of these instances of services in this country, rewarded by appointments in Europe, the question naturally occurs, what interest have these servants of a foreign despotism in the free institutions of this country? What sympathies with American liberty can these foreigners have, educated as they have been in their own country in the principles of despotic institutions, living but temporarily in this country, whose entire political system is diametrically opposed to their whole education, and looking forward after their task is performed to a recall, to comfortable benefices and high places of profit and honor at home, to rewards devised by Austria and the Pope, and meted out to their faithful advocates according to the zeal and devotion manifested to their interests. What would be said of the Episcopalian or Presbyterian or Methodist or Baptist clergy were they announced as foreigners sent from England, who, after a short sojourn of active service in this country, were known to be recalled and promoted in their own country to be bishops and dignified officers under the British government? Is there no danger? Oh, end of footnote right there. Is there no danger to our free institutions from a host commanded by such men, whose numbers are constantly increasing by the machinations and funds of Austria? Consider, too, the power with which these Jesuits and other priests possess through the confessional of knowing the private characters and affairs of all the leading men in the community, the power arising from their right to prescribe the kinds and degrees of penance, and the power arising from the right to refuse absolution to those who do not comply with their commands. Suppose such powers were exercised by the ministers of any other sect, the Episcopalian, the Methodist, the Presbyterian, the Baptist, etc. What an outcry would be raised in the land! And should not the men who possess such powers be jealously watched by all lovers of liberty? Is it possible that these Jesuits can have a sincere attachment to the principles of free institutions? Do not these principles oppose a constant barrier to their exercise of that arbitrary power, which they claim as a divine right, and which they exercise, too, in all countries where they are dominant? Can it not be perceived that, although they find it politic for the present to conceal their anti-republican tenets, yet this concealment will be merely temporary, and is only adopted now, the better to lull suspicion? Is it not in accordance with the experience of popish policy that Jesuits should encroach by little and little, and persevere till they have attained to plenitude of power? At present they have but one aim in this country which absorbs all others, and that is to make themselves popular. If they succeed in this, we shall then learn, when too late to remedy the evil, that popery abandons none of its divine rights. The leaders of this sect are disciplined and organized, and have their adherents entirely subservient to their will. Here, then, is a regular party, a religious sect, ready to throw the weight of its power, as circumstances may require, ready to favor any man or set of men who will engage to favor it. And to whom do these leaders look for their instructions? Is it to a citizen or body of citizens belonging to this country? Is it to a body of men kept in check by the ever-jealous eyes of other bodies around them, and by the immediate publicity which must be given to all their doings? No. They are men owning no law on this side of the ocean. They are the Pope and his consistory of cardinals, following the plans and instructions of the Imperial Cabinet of Austria. Plans formed in the secret councils of that cabinet, instructions delivered in secret, according to the modes of despotism, to their obedient officers, and distributed through the well-disciplined ranks in this country, to be carried into effect in furtherance of any political designs the Austrian cabinet may think advantageous to its own interests. And will these designs be in favor of liberty? With a party thus formed and disciplined among us, who will venture to say that our elections will not be under the control of Metternich, and that appointment of a president of the United States will not be virtually made in the Imperial Cabinet of Vienna, or the consistory of cardinals at Rome? Will this be pronounced incredible? It will be the almost certain result of the dominion of popery in this country. But we need not imagine that it will always be deemed expedient to preserve the name of president, or even the elective character of our chief magistrate. How long would it take the sophistry that deludes the mind of its victim into the belief of a man's infallibility, and fixes the delusion there indelibly, binding him soul and body to believe against the evidence of his reason and his senses, holding him in the most abject obedience to the will of a fellow man? How long, I say, would it take such sophistry to impose the duty of acknowledging the divine right of an emperor over the priest-conquered vassals of this country? Vassals well instructed in the Russian catechism, and prepared to worship, love, and obey as their lord and master some scion of the House of Habsburg, the Emperor of the United States? Okay, that was chapters 3 and 4 of Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States by American inventor Samuel Morse. 1835 was when it was written. To a point where a person like that, they really are afraid to be wrong, because they deep down know that if they're, the next time they're found out to be wrong, I mean, we all eventually are going to be wrong again, we're human, they know that they have to go through that process again of beating themselves up. Hey, they were wrong again. Well, guess what? Collins Brothers, you're wrong. The Vatican sits atop the Illuminati. And it's okay. You're human. You can be wrong. But you got to shake the cognitive dissonance. You have to have the Christian humility to be able to overcome your intellectual arrogance. I'm sorry. Okay, with that, enough of that. Let's get into Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, Chapter 3. Before commencing the examination of the perfect fitness of the instrument, Catholic missions, to accomplish the political designs upon this country of Austria and her despotic allies, I would premise, says Samuel Morse, that I have nothing to do in these remarks with the purely religious character of the tenets of the Roman Catholic sect. They are not even in discussion. If any wish to resolve their doubts in the religious controversy, the acute pens of the polemic writers of the day will furnish them abundant means of deciding for themselves. But every religious sect has certain principles of government growing out of its particular religious belief, and which will... This is the Ministry of Truth. I'm Gordon Comstock. We're going to get into chapters 3 and 4 of Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States by Samuel Morse, the renowned inventor, American inventor from the 1800s, Samuel Morse. Suppressed, out of print, long out of print book. But he was warning us in 1835 of exactly what's happened today. And, oh gosh, I just heard the most recent installment of the Collins brothers, Paul and Philip Collins, on the From the Grassy Knoll show. And doggone, if they weren't at it again, poo-pooing the idea that there could ever be one entity atop the New World Order. Of course, they have no scientific basis for that. They have no rational basis for that. It is, it's their own belief system. The fact is, we have pyramidal structures everywhere, and I can concede their point that maybe at a future date, the Chinese might leap out and defy this Illuminati one world government system that's coming. But so what? Yes, entities can jump out and throw revolutions. That's what the infallible authority of the Church. The moment, therefore, we give up any part whatever, the whole falls. For what admits not of being divided must evidently stand entire or fall entire. Protestantism, on the contrary, is founded on the Bible. The Bible is the rallying point of all Protestant religious sects. Let me put in my 2 cents here. This was written by Samuel Morse in 1835, before, of course, 50 years before the devilish revising committee that resurrected the counterfeit Alexandrian Gnostic Bibles that we find in the NIV and the NASV and the RSV, etc. And so Samuel Morse would have no idea, would not have understood that there actually would be more than one Bible, that there would be the bogus Bible and the real Bible, or he probably would have written it in here. Yes, Protestantism is founded on the Bible, but is founded upon the real Bible, King James, and the lineage of Bibles leading up to the King James. Continuing now. They all believe that God is its author, the Protestants do. The religious faith of each is bound to this one volume. But as the Bible prescribes, no form of faith or doctrine will be found to agree or disagree with the principles of any form of civil government. Footnote to that. Opposite tendencies of popery and Protestantism. On the very threshold of the examination upon which I have here entered, and while searching among the records of the two sects for the political tendencies of the principles of popery and Protestantism, I was struck with the marked difference in extent which the two fields of inquiry legitimately offered for examination. The prime dogma of the Catholics, that all of their church teaches is infallible, unchangeable, that what she has once taught as truth must now and forever be truth, lays open to our examination to a wide field. All and each of the precepts, laws, and acts of popery from the earliest ages to the present day may be legitimately quoted to show the political character of that sect. Innovation, repeal, reform, or progress can find no admittance into the papal system without destroying the fundamental liberty on which the whole system rests. The whole of our faith, says Cardinal Pallavicini, an infallible authority, rests upon one indivisible article, namely, wrote about time and again, That's what we see through history. But there are also periods in history, probably most of the periods in history, where one entity reigns. And I'm telling you, if you read the book, The Transformation of the Republic, by Charles Wilcox, you will see that from the 1800s on, at least, the entity that was atop this conspiracy for world government could only have been Papa Nero and his boys, and his scarlet and purple-clad boys. Now, why are the Collins brothers afraid of this? They have such acute research skills, and they're afraid to turn their research skills towards this avenue. They don't even countenance this. It doesn't fit their paradigm. Well, the fact is, folks, when somebody is terribly brilliant, like the Collins brothers, it's been my observation that they really, people like that, they're almost always right, because the few times they are wrong, they really beat themselves up over it more than the average guy. So it gets to